Start. Hi friends. In the previous class, we discussed about the basic anatomy of a nerve and types of injury and what are the basic modalities of treatment. And in the treatment, we learned about conservative treatment and operative treatment, and we knew that things. And today we are going to discuss about some of the important individual nerve injuries and how to examine in that nerve injury. Okay. So today I am starting with brachial plexus anatomy. So brachial plexus, you all know brachial plexus starts with roots, trunks, divisions, and cords and individual nerves. And brachial plexus are formed by the ventral rami of C5 to T1. Sometimes C4 also involved, it is called preaxial. Sometimes T2 also involved, contributes a significant component of brachial plexus. It's called postaxial brachial plexus. Okay, it is a individual nerves. We all know. I am discussing briefly about that. At the level of roots, you are producing two branches: dorsal-scapular nerve and thoracodorsal nerve. Dorsal-scapular nerve is the branch of C5 nerve group, and thoracodorsal nerve supplies. Long thoracic nerve is the branch of C5, C6, and C7. Okay, long thoracic nerve. And at the level of trunks, there are two nerves. There is nerve to subclavius and suprascapular nerve. Suprascapular nerve supplies supraspinatus muscle and infraspinatus muscle. Okay. At the level of trunks, the trunks divided into two branches, anterior branch and posterior branch. And these unites to form lateral cord, posterior cord, and medial cord. There are three posterior branches of three trunks forms. Three divisions forms posterior cord, and upper C5, C6, C7 forms two divisions. These two combined forms lateral cord, and medial cord is formed by C8 and T1 nerves. The lateral cord produces three branches: this lateral pectoral nerve, maxillary nerve, and lateral half of the medial nerve. And the medial cord produces their lateral pectoral, here middle pectoral nerve, and their musculocutaneous nerve. It produces ulnar nerve, and median it contributes to middle half of the median nerve, and adding to that, it produces medial cutaneous nerve of the arm and medial cutaneous nerve of the forearm are directly produced from the brachial plexus from the medial cord. And posterior cord produces five branches. This is upper and lower subscapular nerve, which supplies protective cuff muscles, and thoracodorsal nerve, which supplies latissimus dorsi, and axillary nerve and radial nerve. Many classifications of brachial injuries are present, but the most commonly we know are basic brachial plexus injuries or Erb's palsy, which is the upper part of the brachial plexus were injured, and Klumpke's palsy. Klumpke's palsy is the lower part of the brachial plexus were injured. But Erb's palsy is very common compared to Klumpke's palsy. There are very few cases of Klumpke's palsy were reported. What is Erb's palsy? Erb's palsy means upper roots of the brachial plexus were injured. So it generally involves C5, C6, C7 nerves were injured, but commonly involves injury at Erb's point. So what is Erb's point? Erb's point is point in the upper part of the brachial plexus where six nerves are. The junction six nerves are formed. So this is the Erb's point here. In Erb's point, you can see upper trunk and see the trunk of the C5 trunk and C6 trunk is combined here, and you see suprascapular nerve is emerging from here, and nerve subclavius is emerging from it, and here the combined C5 and C6 trunks are dividing into anterior and posterior branches. So here six branches are combining at this place. So C5 and C6 nerve roots are mainly damaged in Erb's palsy. So C5, 6. So what are the upper root supplies means here you see suprascapular nerve and musculocutaneous nerve and axillary nerve, which mainly comprise of C5 and C6 nerve root supply. So these are the nerves are mainly damaged or mainly paralyzed in case of Erb's palsy. So this is the mechanism of injury in case of Erb's palsy. The nerve is stretched. So here the head is stretched, the upper part of the brachial plexus were stretched and injured in case of Erb's palsy. This is the common in case of adults. This is the mode of injury. So in case of infants, birth injury also, the head is extracted. During the extraction of head, it may be extended to one half of the head. In that cases also, sometimes the cases also upper part of the brachial plexus were injured. This is called this is a mode of mechanism of Erb's palsy. So what are the types of these brachial plexus injuries? So if the nerve root is completely avulsed, so nerve roots comes from a spinal cord. The nerve root during the stitching, the nerve root is completely avulsed from a spinal cord. This is called avulsion type of injury. It is completely irreparable. Nothing can be done. Only tendon transfers were the only option in this case of brachial plexus. So it's a rupture. Rupture means the nerve is not torn, but not the nerve is torn, but not at the spinal cord. So it's not at the junction of spinal cord and root junction. Some little bit lower level, the nerves are the plexus are injured. So surgical repair is possible. So neuroma means complete injury was not done. So the scar tissue formed, putting the pressure on the nerve. So it can heal without surgery. And neuropraxia, it is minor injury. So minor injury, some myelin sheath was damaged. Neuropraxia can be completely recoverable. So it discussed in the previous class. Neuropraxia is 100% recoverable, but may take time. It is very proximal injury. So how it expresses the Erb's palsy, how it expresses. So I previously told in the Erb's palsy, three main nerves are damaged: suprascapular nerve and axillary nerve and musculocutaneous nerve. These three nerves are mainly contains of C5 and C6 nerve components. So this you know what I mean. So what happens in this case? So abduction is impossible because axillary nerve supplies deltoid, and deltoid is the chief muscle of abduction. So deltoid muscle is axillary nerve involvement. Deltoid muscle is unable to function. So arm is unable to abduct. Arm will be at the side of the body, and external rotation is impossible because suprascapular nerve is damaged. Suprascapular nerve is paralyzed in Erb's palsy, and suprascapular nerve supplies supraspinatus muscle and infraspinatus muscle, and teres minor is supplied by axillary nerve, and suprascapular nerve supplies supraspinatus and infraspinatus muscles. And supraspinatus muscle mainly assists in the abduction, initial part of the abduction. So now also, with the paralysis of supraspinatus muscles, abduction is not possible. And infraspinatus and teres minor muscles are external rotators of the arm. So external rotation is not possible. So arm will be internally rotated because unopposed action of subscapularis muscle. And active flexion of elbow is impossible because paralysis of biceps, brachialis, brachioradialis muscles. So biceps and brachialis muscles are supplied by musculocutaneous nerve. So active flexion of the elbow is not possible. So arm will be at the side of the body, internally rotated, and elbow in extension. And paralysis of supinator muscle. Supinator muscles are supplied to musculocutaneous nerve, and supinator muscle is paralyzed because so that arm will be in pronation, and biceps is also paralyzed, and biceps is also one of the strong supinator muscle of the forearm. So both the supinator muscles of the forearm was paralyzed means the forearm is in pronation. So how the deformity will be? Arm will be at the side of the hand, as it is adducted, internally rotated, elbow is extended, and forearm is pronated. And this is called policeman tip deformity. So here it is called policeman tip deformity. So arm will be in the position in case of expulsive. And sensation is absent over the deltoid muscle and the lateral aspect of the forearm hand. But sensory changes are sometimes may not be appear because we previously discussed the sensory changes are 100% observed only in case of isolated nerve zones, isolated sensory zones only. So what is the deltoid muscle? Upper lateral cutaneous zone, which is supplied by the regimental batch area, is nerve supplied by supraspinatus muscle. You see, so that was also involved, and deltoid muscle also supplies the lateral this part of the skin. So this is also sensation is impaired, and the muscular cutaneous nerve continues as lateral cutaneous nerve of the forearm. So in this case, also sensations are disturbed in case of Erb's palsy. So this is a baby of Erb's palsy. So you see, you see the deformity in this baby. Arm is adducted, internal rotated, forearm and elbow extended, forearm is pronated. This is a typical deformity of Erb's palsy. What is Klumpke's paralysis? Klumpke's paralysis is opposite of Erb's palsy. In Erb's palsy, upper plexus, upper roots of the brachial plexus are involved. Mean that are C5, C6, C7, and here mainly C8 and T1 are involved. In Erb's palsy is stretching at this level, damage, and Klumpke's paralysis, complete opposite mechanism injury. This is a mechanism injury, stretching stretching by one hand by body, alert in case of, or sometimes pulling of the hand in this butt trauma. So lower parts of the brachial plexus were stretched and injured in case of Klumpke's paralysis, but Klumpke's paralysis is rare compared to Erb's palsy. Associated with Horner syndrome. So T1 nerve root is involved. So Horner syndrome can also be sometimes associated with Klumpke's paralysis. So associated with Horner syndrome should alert the examiner to the possibility of an avulsion injury of lower plexus, and myelography and electromyography may be necessary in case of acute such type of injury. So C8 T1 nerve roots are damaged in case of Klumpke's paralysis. C8 T1 nerve roots mainly supply the small muscles of the hand. In the Erb's palsy, the small muscles of the hand were not at all involved. It mainly involves proximal muscles. In Klumpke's paralysis, reverse, if proximal muscles were not involved, mainly the small muscles of hand were involved. So the primary dysfunction is apparent in the intrinsic musculature of the hand, along with paralysis of wrist and finger plexus, and forearm pronators may also be involved. The sensory deficit is along the medial aspect of the arm, forearm, and hand. Okay. So I'm coming to axillary nerve. So we are going to discuss about individual peripheral nerves now. So axillary nerves. The axillary nerve is composed of fibers mainly from C5 and C6, which is a branch of the posterior part of the brachial plexus. Okay. So it then winds around the neck of the humerus, passing through the quadrangular space. You know quadrangular space and triangular intervals. So here the triangular space is present. This is quadrangular space, and this is triangular interval space. So see this is the radial nerve. The radial nerve passing through the triangular interval. So leave at radial nerve. So in the axillary nerve passes through the quadrangular space and winds around the surgical neck of the humerus. Okay. So it supplies deltoid and teres minor muscles. So deltoid muscle mainly supplies abduction of the arm, and teres minor is external causes plays an important role in the external rotation of the arm when an arm is in 90 degrees abduction. So this is the movement on the teres minor muscle, and this is the abduction done by deltoid. So this nerve is commonly injured by fractures or dislocations around shoulder, penetrative wounds, and the rib blows. So this anterior dislocation of the shoulder is one of the major causes of axillary nerve palsy. And surgical neck humerus also nerve can be entrapped at the end of the fracture fragment, when in that case also axillary nerve is paralyzed. So this is the sensory area supplied by the axillary nerve. You see, this is the anterior and posterior views. This is the sensory area supplied by the axillary nerve. But because the lesion of axillary nerve sometimes does not cause anesthesia, the diagnosis must be rest solely on the presence of absence of function of deltoid muscle. Only in the isolated zone only the sensory supply is damaged. Okay. In the previous class, I have already told this about. So deltoid, and usually deltoid paralysis is easily detected by the inability to actively abduct the arm. Okay. However, it is well documented that abduction of the arm is possible in the presence of deltoid paralysis because of the action of the supraspinatus and because of the rotation of the scapula. So you all know abduction of the arm is done by three muscles. The initial part of the abduction means first 50 degrees of abduction is initiated by supraspinatus muscle, and later middle up to 90 degrees of the arm abduction is done by deltoid, and later above 90 degrees the abduction is combined effort of deltoid and this rotation of the scapula. Rotation of the scapula. But sometimes, so the deltoid paralysis means remaining two abductor mechanisms are possible. Sometimes these two mechanisms may mask deltoid paralysis. So therefore, it is essential to observe and palpate the deltoid muscle for contraction of this examination. So just by asking the patient to abduct the arm is not the way of testing of deltoid muscle. You have to keep an arm on the deltoid and palpate for contraction of the deltoid muscle. Not only for deltoid, any muscle you are testing means you have to keep an hand on the muscle and you have to palpate for contraction of that muscle. So in that way only you are accurately assessing that muscle function. Okay. This is aeroplane splint used in case of deltoid paralysis. The arm is in, so we have to, when you splint you are using it, you have to supplement that muscle's inability of that muscle's action. So deltoid paralysis means arm is unable to abduct. So you have to keep the arm in that abducted position with the use of an splint. So this is the aeroplane splint. And the next nerve is muscular cutaneous nerve, which is a branch of lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Mainly composed of C5 and C6 nerve fibers from C5 and C6 nerve roots. So the muscular cutaneous nerve composed of fibers from C5 and C6, which is a branch of lateral cord of the brachial plexus, and it is some isolated injury of muscular cutaneous nerve injury is rare. It most commonly injured by penetrating injury, but occasionally by anterior dislocation of shoulder or fractures of the femoral leg. Okay, this is the course of the muscular cutaneous nerve. You see, it supplies coracobrachialis and biceps brachii and brachialis muscle. And after supplying these three muscles in the arm, it continues as into the forearm as lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve, which supplies the lateral half of the forearm. Okay. When this nerve is injured in the axilla, injury is often is in conjunction with injuries to other components of the brachial plexus. You see, isolated injury of muscular cutaneous nerve is there. It usually combines with other nerve injuries. Complete division of nerve may be overlooked because the sensory loss may be ill-defined and flexion of the elbow is brachioradialis may be strong enough to mask biceps paralysis. Okay. So muscular cutaneous nerve is damaged. So what is the main function? It is the flexion of the elbow because it supplies biceps muscle and it supplies sensory supply to lateral half of the forearm. But I always repeatedly telling sensory supply is not that easy to detect because it overlaps. Only in the isolated zones supplied by that nerve only you can observe sensitivity. Otherwise, it's generally other remaining nerves masks the sensory deficit. So you can't rely on sensory deficit. And other disability you get in case of muscular tension, flexion of the elbow is impaired because the biceps is damaged. But another strong muscle is present in the lateral half of the arm is brachioradialis. It is also produces elbow flexion. So in brachioradialis also masks the paralysis caused by the biceps paralysis caused by the muscular cutaneous nerve injury. So what you have to do was same in the case of deltoid also. You have to keep an eye on the biceps muscle. You have to observe contraction to biceps contraction so that you can assess whether muscular cutaneous nerve injury is present or not. So this is the time I type here. In this instance, it is essential to palpate the biceps while testing its function to identify specific muscle contractions. This is the way of testing. You see, with one hand is stabilizing the forearm and asking the patient to to flex the elbow, and with the other hand he kept the other hand on the biceps and eliciting or palpating the contraction of biceps. Yes, examination. Only biceps muscles applied because brachialis and coracobrachialis were difficult for it. Only biceps can be examined in case of muscular nerve. So when coming to radial nerve, so these three nerves. In the next part, I'm going to radial nerve and median nerve and ulnar nerve. These three nerve injuries are very important. So what is the radial nerve? And radial nerve is a branch of posterior cord. You see, this is the posterior cord. The posterior cord supplies produces maxillary nerve. After that, it is continuous as radial nerve. This diagram is the radial nerve in relation to the bone. This is a little bit zoom image of the individual radial nerve branches. Okay. Here in the axilla, radial nerve branches are very important. In the axilla, so okay, leave. In the triceps, how many heads are present? There are 3 heads are present. Lateral head, long head, and medial head. So in the level of axilla means very high level, the radial nerve supplies long head of the triceps, and it also gives off posterior cutaneous nerve of the arm. So later it descends. So in the axilla it gives off triceps and posterior cutaneous nerve of the arm. So this is a spiral groove. So radial nerve comes, it will go a little bit downwards, and in the spiral groove, it gives off lower lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm and posterior cutaneous nerve of the forearm. And it also, it didn't mention it, it also gives up to medial and lateral heads of the triceps. Okay. So it winds around the radius in the spiral groove here. In the spiral groove, winds around the spiral groove. Here it comes to the anterior and lateral half of the arm. So here it gives off brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis, longus, and brevis. You see here it gives off brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis, longus, and before it divides into 2 branches just below the elbow. So just below the elbow, it gives off 3 branches and it divides. So here at the level of elbow, you see these are same, and one branch is pure motor. It is called posterior interosseous nerve. It goes off between 2 heads of the supinator muscle and supplies the posterior extensor muscles of the forearm. And the anterior sensory branch supplies under surface of the brachioradius. Supplies. You see, radial nerve supplies the radial 3.5 fingers of the dorsal surface. So the sensory nerve goes along the under surface of the brachioradius and gives off sensory supply to radial 3.5 fingers of space. And the isolated autonomic zone of radial nerve is first verb space. Okay. So once again, I am repeating all the branches. In the radial nerve is a branch of posterior cord, and at the level of axilla, it gives off a long head of triceps and posterior cutaneous nerve of the forearm here. And at the level of spiral groove, it gives off lower lateral cutaneous nerve of arm and posterior cutaneous nerve of the forearm, and medial and lateral head of the triceps. And just exiting the spiral groove, it pierces the lateral intermuscular septum and comes up the lateral half of the arm, and then there it gives off 3 branches to brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis. Then it divides into 2 branches. It supplies of divides of 2 branches, and posterior pure interosseous nerve, which is a pure motor, and anterior sensory branch, which goes along the under surface of the brachioradius and supplies the radial 3.5 fingers on the dorsal surface of the hand. So these are the list of muscles supplied by the radial nerve: brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, supinator, extensor carpi radialis brevis. And these are extensor digitorum communis, which is a 4th component of the posterior compartment of the forearm. Extensor digiti minimi, which is 6th component. Abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis longus, 1st and 2nd components, and extensor pollicis brevis, 3rd component, and extensor indicis proprius. These are the muscles supplied by the posterior interosseous nerve and radial nerve. So These are the sensory supplies, sensory cutaneous nerves supplied by the radial nerve. The lower, this is the area supplied by lower lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm, and upper lateral cutaneous nerve arm is supplied by the suprascapular nerve and axillary nerve. Okay, and posterior cutaneous nerve of the arm is supplied by posterior cutaneous arm is gives a branch by the level of axilla and supplies the posterior half of the arm, and posterior cutaneous nerve of the forearm, which is a branch at the level of spiral groove by the radial nerve and supplies posterior half of the forearm, and superficial branch supplies the radial 3.5 fingers of the hand on the dorsal side. Okay. So how it is examination of the supplies muscle supplied by the radial nerve. So triceps muscle. So have the patient place on upper arm parallel to the ground, which eliminate the effect of gravity, and starting with the forearm half extended and support the limb at the elbow, and instruct the patient to fully extend the forearm against resistance. So we have to ask the patient to extend the forearm against resistance, and with another hand here you see here he palpating the contraction of triceps. Then this is the way to examine the triceps. And brachioradialis assessment. So flexion of the elbow in the supinated position is mainly done by the biceps, but flexion of the elbow in the mid-prone position, means halfway between the flexion and extension, is mainly done by brachioradialis. So we have to flex. We have to pay. So how we examine the brachioradialis? The patient flexes the elbow with the forearm with halfway between pronation and supination. This is the best way. This is the best position where the brachioradialis is most active, and ask the patient to flex against resistance. And another hand, you have to keep the brachioradialis and check for the contraction of brachioradialis muscle. So extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis muscles supply. These are extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis for extensor of the wrist and radial deviation. So this is the hand, this is the radial deviation, this is the ulnar deviation. So these extend the arm, extend the hand and cause radial deviation. So we have to, so these do like this. So we have to put against resistance like in this position and ask the patient to do the same and palpate the contraction for extensor carpi radialis and longus and brevis. Okay. And extensor digitorum communis. Extensor digitorum communis means similar to flexor digitorum profundus in the flexor compartment, and it starts here and it ends at the tip base of the distal phalanx of the. So it's so how do you examine this? You have to extend. You have to ask the patient to extend metacarpophalangeal joints. This is mainly extended by extensor digitorum communis. We have to ask the patient to do the same, and we have to palpate the contraction for extensor digitorum communis. Not extensor of interphalangeal joint, and extension of interphalangeal joint, even though done by extensor digitorum communis, it's mainly done by lumbricans. So extensor pollicis longus assessment. Thumb extension is best assessed with the hand as a fist resting on its ulnar surface. The thumb is extended away from the other fingers. Ask if the patient is hitchhiking. So the resistance is applied to the distal phalanx to assess the extensor pollicis longus. Okay. So radial nerve palsy clinical features. So patient loses the ability to extend the wrist, fingers, and thumbs. Movements that are essential for functional grasp. So what happens to wrist drop? Wrist will be dropped because the extensor muscles of the forearm of the hand supplied by posterior interosseous paralyzed. So wrist will be dropped. Wrist unable to extend. So this is called wrist drop. In addition, patient loses the grip strength because he cannot stabilize the wrist during grip power. Because for a proper grip, for example, if you take this is a proper grip, the patient, so you have to hold like this. But little bit of extension is present, not only flexors, even though you are holding this thing with the help of flexors, but you have to present some extensions also present. Because extensor, while holding you this thing, the extensor muscles are stabilizing the hand. So in the absence of extensor action, the hand will be may not be stabilized. So you see, grip may not be that much tight. You see, grip that means it will be pulled off easily. So grip will be less. In this position, the grip will be good. You cannot pull off this thing easily. So stabilizing action on the wrist will be lost. So grip also weakens in case of radial nerve palsy. And loss of cutaneous sensibility in the radial nerve distribution also lost. So what is high radial nerve palsy? What is a radial nerve palsy? High radial nerve palsy defined as any injury proximal to the elbow. Proximal to the elbow. So if injury is proximal to elbow means posterior intraosseous nerve is damaged. So posterior intraosseous nerve damage means wrist, finger, and thumb extension as well as thumb extension are lost. Okay. Since low radial nerve palsy defined as injury to the PIN, so occurs distal to the elbow. Distal to the elbow means wrist extension is preserved. Because wrist extension is done by extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, because the supply nerve supply to extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis done proximal to the elbow. Because the injury happens in lower renal palsy is distal to the elbow, means these extension is preserved. So wrist extension is okay, but the finger extension is absent. This is called low radial nerve palsy. Occasionally the radial nerve palsy, but in both the radial nerve palsy, the triceps is not damaged because triceps is long head of triceps is innervated at very high level in the axilla. So occasionally the radial nerve may be injured still higher up, in which case even triceps may also be paralyzed, but which is very, very rare. So wrist drop splint, this is two types of splints used for wrist drop. This is a static cock-up splint, and this is a dynamic cock-up splint used for wrist drop in case of radial nerve injuries. So median nerve. So median nerve is derived from both lateral and medial cords of brachial plexus, with the lateral cord providing mostly sensory axons from C6 and C7, and medial cord providing the motor axon from C8 and T1. So both radial nerve and median nerve roots comprise of C5 to T1 and everything. So median nerve is also called Labrus nerve. So this is the median nerve anatomy. So median nerve is formed by the lateral cord, which contributes from the lateral cord and medial cord. And in the arm, medial nerve has no branches. So it has branches only below at the elbow only. Okay. At the just below elbow, the median nerve supplies pronator teres and flexor carpi radialis and palmaris longus and flexor digitorum superficialis. So these are all the superficial compartment of the polar forearm muscles. Later it gives off a branch which is called, say, there posterior intraosseous nerve, because it is posterior to intraosseous membrane. Posterior intraosseous nerve is a branch of radial nerve, and the anterior intraosseous nerve is a branch of median nerve. It supplies flexor, lateral half of the flexor digitorum profundus and flexor pollicis longus and pronator quadratus muscles. Only three muscles separated by them. And the main median nerve trunk is continuous, and it gives off one branch, which is palmar cutaneous nerve branch of the arm. So it supplies the thenar area of the complex. So here, the median nerve gives off branches to these pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, and palmaris longus and muscles. And the anterior intraosseous branch supplies the deeper muscles. And the arm and the nerve goes up like this. Here at this level, the median nerve gives off one branch, palmar cutaneous branch, which goes superficial to the carpal tunnel. You see this carpal tunnel. So it goes superficial to carpal tunnel and supplies this area of this area. And the remaining median nerve goes through the carpal tunnel and gives off 5 motor branches, which supplies 3 thenar muscles and 2 lumbricus muscles, and gives off multiple branches to supply the medial 3.5 fingers of the polar surface of the hand. So that's why the palmar cutaneous nerve branch goes superficial to the carpal tunnel. In the carpal tunnel syndrome, this area is not involved. Only the finger nerve supply is damaged. Okay. So these are the muscles supplied by the median nerve. Pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and in the intermediate root, flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, pronator quadratus. And in the hand, first and second lumbricus were supplied, and opponent's pollicis and abductor pollicis brevis and flexor pollicis. These are the thenar muscles. These 3 are supplied by the median nerve. So the sensory innervation, I already told. The median nerve is responsible for the cutaneous innervation of radial 3.5 part of the hand. This is achieved by the 2 branches. The palmar cutaneous nerve branch arises in the forearm and travels into hand. It innervates the lateral aspect of the palm. This does not pass through the carpal tunnel, goes superficial to the carpal tunnel, and it is paired in the carpal tunnel syndrome. And palmar digital cutaneous branch is supplied by this and arises in the hand and innervates palmar surface and fingertips of the lateral 3.5 fingers. Okay. So median nerve assessment. So median nerve supplies pronator teres muscle, which is a chief pronator of the forearm. So how would you examine? The forearm is extended and fully pronated, and the patient then instructor resists the supination done by the examiner. Forearm is fully pronated and flexed, and our examiner will do the supination of the hand, which should be resisted by the patient. And you have to keep another hand on the pronator muscle and observe for its contraction. And flexor carpi radialis, which causes flexion of the hand. So patient flexes the wrist along the trajectory of the forearm. In this way, we will examine the flexor carpi radialis muscle. And flexor digitorum superficialis. Flexor digitorum superficialis is muscle which inserts at the base of the middle phalanx. So it causes the flexion of the MCP joint and flexion of the proximal interphalangeal joint, but it have no action on the interphalangeal joint. And flexor digitorum profundus passes all the way from here, passes along with the flexor digitorum superficialis, and it sets at the base of the distal phalanx. So flexor digitorum superficialis flexes only proximal interphalangeal joint, and flexor digitorum profundus flexes both PIP joint and DIP joint. So we have to examine the superficialis means you have to nullify the action of flexor digitorum profundus because it also causes PIP joint flexion. So how do you nullify flexor digitorum profundus? You see, for example, ask the patient to flex the finger. So I am flexing the finger because with the help of FDP and FDS, I am flexing the finger. How do you examine isolated FDS? So you have to stretch the other 3 fingers so that the FDP is stretching. Now ask me to flex the finger here. I am unable to flex the DIP joint because the FDP is kept taut. Only the flexion can be done now by FDS. So my FDS is good. So I am only managed to flex the finger, but FDS can only flex up to PIP joint only. So that thing only I am doing. Now releasing. So I am doing DIP flexion. So this is the way you can examine FDP and FDS action. Flexor digitorum profundus, I already told now, this will be examined the flexion of DIP joint, PIP joint and by FDS. And flexor pollicis longus assessment, flexor pollicis longus is ask the patient to flex the interphalangeal joint of the thumb. OK circle. This is the OK. This is the OK done by the normally. But in case of median nerve injury, the flexor digitorum profundus is damaged. So patient is unable to flex the DIP joint. So if you ask the patient to OK, they will do like that. Instead of tips touching here, the patient is asked do like this. This is called unable to do OK sign in case of median nerve injury. So this is normal, this is abnormal. So abductor pollicis longus assessment, this is a pen test. Abduction means like this. So you have to keep, for example, if you keep pen or anything like that and ask the patient to touch this by thumb. So I am doing this because my abduction is good. So this is called pen test. Asthma clasping test, pointing index. So ask the patient to interlock both fingers of both hands and do like this. So if the patient asks the do like this, they will do. But in the index finger, I only median nerve can supply. So this is for index finger, the flexor digitorum profundus is absent. So it is unable to flex. So it keep on like this. So this is called asthma clasping test or pointing index. In the third finger also supplied by median nerve only. But it can do little bit that because the lateral, these 2 fingers of flexor digitorum profundus supplied by ulnar nerve, it can give us a little bit of nerve supply to this finger, but it cannot give to that. That much distance it can cross. So in the median nerve injury also, the third finger can flex a little bit, but not this finger, point index finger. So in median nerve injury, we always have to examine from index finger for proper results. Okay, this is pointing index or optional clasping text. Ape thumb deformity, because the median nerve supplies the thenar group, median nerve is absent, the thenar group atrophies, it gives off a ape thumb deformity like this. You see here the flexor, the thenar muscles are atrophied, gives some atrophied appearance, which is called ape thumb deformity. Clinical findings. So I already told, can be high or low, means above the elbow or below the elbow. Above the elbow means supracondylar fracture of humerus is one of the best cause. And so what are the motor functions lost? The flexor and pronators of the forearm are paralyzed with the exception of flexor carpi ulnaris and middle of the flexor digitorum profundus supplied by the ulnar nerve. And forearm is constantly supinated because the pronator is absent. The pronator teres is paralyzed, the pronator quadratus is paralyzed. The forearm is supinated with the action of supinator and biceps. And the flexion is weak, often accompanied by the abduction because the full of the flexor carpi ulnaris. And flexion of the thumb also prevented because the flexor pollicis longus is paralyzed. And both longus and brevis muscles are paralyzed. Longus muscle is origins here, and flexor pollicis brevis is a component, is a thenar muscle. The lateral two lumbricals are paralyzed, and patient will. And what are the action of lumbricals? Lumbricals will cause flexion of the MCP joint and extension of the interphalangeal. This is the lumbricals action. So lumbricals with absent means you will produce Claghand, opposite action. But which is more prominent in case of ulnar nerve injury. But in the median nerve, the lateral two lumbricals are paralyzed. So Claghand is observed in the lateral two fingers of the hand. Okay. Sensory function, lack of sensation over the areas that are supplied by the median nerve innervates. Characteristic signs: the thenar eminence is waste due to atrophy of the thenar muscles, and if the patient tries to make a fist, only the little and ring fingers can flex completely. This results in a characteristic shape of the hand known as hand of benediction. If injury at the wrist and lower third of the forearm, means laceration just proximal to the flexor retinaculum. The forearm muscles were already supplied, so if the injury occurs here, the forearm muscles were already supplied, which is unaffected. The one in the median nerve is paralyzed. So the thenar muscles paralyzed and the lateral two lumbricals are paralyzed, but the forearm muscles, means flexion of the hand, wrist, these things are pronation, and these things are normal because the injury is to happen distal to their muscle nerve supply. So ulnar nerve. Ulnar nerve is derived from the medial part of the brachial plexus with the root value C8 and T1. So ulnar nerve has comprised of two nerve roots only, C8 and T1. But median and radial contributes has a nerve supply of all 5 nerve roots, but median nerve, ulnar nerve is only C8 and T1. It is also called musician's nerve. So this is the course of the ulnar nerve. Ulnar nerve, which is a branch of medial cord, and like median nerve, ulnar nerve also no branches in the arm. Just below the elbow, it gives up 2 branches. So I already told you, flexor carpi ulnaris and medial half of the flexor digitorum profundus. Medial half means the flexor digitorum that's supplying these 2 fingers of the muscle supplied by the ulnar nerve. So it comes like this. And in the median nerve also, I told one sensory branch gives up here and supplies the palmar cutaneous area. But in the ulnar nerve, the 2 branches will come like that. First, one branch will goes to dorsal region and it supplies the dorsal 1.5 fingers of the hand. And little bit distally, it gives up another branch which passes superficial to Guyon's canal, through which ulnar nerve naturally passes, and it supplies the cutaneous area of the hypothenar area. And the ulnar nerve passes through the Guyon canal and gives up 15 branches, means hypothenar muscle, adductor pollicis, 2 lumbricals, palmar intraossei, dorsal intraossei, and finally it gives up nerve supply to digital branches through 1.5 fingers of the ulnar nerve. So the motor functions. In the anterior forearm, I already told what they told. In the flexor carpi ulnaris and flexus attacks the hand at the wrist, and flexor digitorum profundus middle half was paralyzed in case of ulnar nerve injury. In the hand, 15 of 20 muscles were paralyzed, and hypothenar muscles, palmaris brevis, and medial two lumbricals, abductor pollicis, and introsseous. Introsseous means 4 dorsal introsseous and 3 ventral introsseous are paralyzed in case of ulnar injury. What are the sensory functions? So I had told this is the dorsal branch which gives off at this level and supplies the dorsal 1.5 fingers of the hand, and then palmar branch. Palmar branch comes ulnar and goes superficial to the Guyon's canal and supplies this palmar area, and later the part goes inside through the Guyon's canal, and after supplying all muscles into the muscles of hand, it supplies by the medial 1.5 fingers by digital branches. So how do you assess the clinical assessment of ulnar nerve? So how do you assess the flexor carpi ulnaris? Ask the patient to flex and adduct the like this. This is ulnar deviation. This is the radial deviation. This is the flexion. Flexion come radial deviation is like this, and flexor come ulnar deviation is like this. So ask the flexor carpi ulnaris does this thing. So you have to ask the patient to do this and against resistance, and you have to palpate for flexor carpi ulnaris. And flexor digitorum profundus, like the same we did in case of median nerve injury. So but we have to do for little and big finger. Mainly you have to do for little finger, because this finger has sometimes have overlapping supply from flexor digitorum profundus of median nerve. And abductor digiti minimi, which is a thenar muscle. So you have to ask the patient abduct the little finger like this. So this is testing of this hypothenar muscle. So you see, I'm doing this, and the muscle is contracting here. And third and fourth lumbricals assessment. So we have to do lumbricals third and fourth. First 2 lumbricals are supplied by median nerve, and lumbricals we have to do lumbricals exam. Third and fourth finger lumbricals were supplied by ulnar nerve. We have to examine. And first dorsal intraossei assessment. Dorsal intraossei, you see what are dorsal intraossei and ventral intraossei? Dorsal intraossei causes abduction of the fingers, means distancing, and ventral intraossei causes closing of the fingers. Okay? Dorsal intraossei, ventral intraossei. Dorsal intraossei, ventral intraossei. And lumbricals also little bit contributes this movement, but lumbricals mainly does this action. Okay? So first dorsal intraossei means you have to ask the patient to do this. So what is Egawa test means? You have to keep like this. You have to keep one finger like this. You have to ask the patient to do this. So the patient doing this means the dorsal intraossei are intact. Test for palmar intraossei. Palmar intraossei means you have to do like this. This action, keeping the fingers together. So you have to keep. Again, this is the AC remote. You have to keep a finger like this, and you have to ask the patient to hold this. You have to pull it. So with the help of palmar intraossei, he is tightly holding this. This is called card test. And abductor pollicis test. For example, this is a book. You have to ask the patient to hold like this. Hold like this, because I will hold like this. So ask the patient to grasp a book between extended thumb and index finger. If ulnar nerve injury is present, he will grasp with the extended thumb, taking full advantage of the adductor pollicis and first palmar intraossei. In ulnar nerve injury, the patient will hold the book by flexing the thumb with the help of flexor pollicis longus. Okay. So if the patient ask the patient to, we will hold like this, because here adductor pollicis is good and doing good. But if ulnar nerve injury is present, so patient will be, so you can't do like this motion. Adductor pollicis is damaged in case of ulnar nerve injury, but flexor pollicis longus, flexion of this thing, flexor pollicis longus, which is supplied to median nerve is intact. So patient will hold instead of this, the patient will hold like this by flexing of the interphalangeal joint. By flexing the interphalangeal joint, instead of this, patient will hold like this, because the adductor pollicis is paralyzed. So with the help of flexor pollicis longus, he is holding the book. Flexor pollicis longus holds book, but it flexes at the interphalangeal joint. So in this case, we observe the ulnar nerve injury. So this is called Froment sign. So clinical findings: ulnar nerve palsy is more devastating injury than the radial nerve palsy. In both high and low ulnar nerve palsy, I will discuss later. Maybe the key pinch is lost because of the absent erectile paralysis and first dorsal intraosseous muscle function. And clawing occurs as a result of paralysis of the intraosseous muscle in the presence of functioning extrinsic finger flexors. And clawing causes a loss of interphalangeal joint extension and metacarpophalangeal joint flexion, which prevents the patient from cupping the hand around the object. In addition to above findings, unlike retinal palsy, sensory deficit in ulnar palsy is clinically here. That ulnar palsy is clinically disabling because the protective sensation in the ulnar distribution important for preventing injury when the hand is placed in resting position. Because we have to keep hand like this. The sensation is absent. The protective sensation is lost in case of ulnar injury. In addition to integration of MCP joint and IPG function, IPG flexion is lost. In the normal hand, integrated finger flexion begins at the metacarpophalangeal joint junction, powered by the intrinsic muscle, followed by the flexion of all three finger joints, powered by the FDP and FDS, holding the finger smoothly into the palm. In the ulnar palsy, MCP joint flexion is not initiated by the intrinsic muscles, and finger flexion begins at IPG joint, formed by the late MCP joint flexion. This results in the rolling motion of the fingers, which prematurely closes them before they reach the palm, making it difficult to grasp the objects. So what? Flex the hand. So what we'll do like this. So we are doing first MCP joint flexion, and later is do like this. But in case of ulnar injury, the MCP joint flexion, which is done by lumbricals, which is lost. So finger flexes first with the help of flexor digitorum profundus and everything, and do like this, and this is called rolling over motion of the ulnar injury. So it's claw hand. This is called Bain and Griffith. What is it? I'm showing a picture of claw hand. There is hyper extension of MCP joints and flexion of the interphalangeal joint due to the loss of action by lumbricals due to by paralysis. This is so it is the claw hand. So we have to do knuckle bender splint. So knuckles, so bending the knuckles. So knuckle bender splint is used in case of claw hand to prevent deformity. So what is an ulnar paradox? What is claw hand? First, claw hand means claw hand is like this. There is extension at the metacarpophalangeal joint and flexion of the interphalangeal joint. So flexion of interphalangeal joint is the deformity which is assisted by long flexors of the arm. Because flexor digitorum profundus is insects here. And what this does? Flexion. So in high ulnar palsy, the nerve supply to the flexor digitorum profundus, that means proximal to elbow, flexor digitorum profundus and flexor carpi ulnar is also lost. So the flexion of the interphalangeal joint action is lost. So some deformity will be less. But in lower ulnar palsy, only the intrinsic muscle is paralyzed. These muscles were not paralyzed. So in that case, the additive action of the flexion by long flexors of the hand are present. So there will be more flexion, more deformity of the claw hand is present. So this is the paradox. Means generally the injury level low means the deformity will be less. But in case of ulnar injury, the injury level low means the deformity will be higher. So this is called ulnar paradox. So another small single nerve I discuss is spinal accessory nerve. And spinal accessory nerve may be injured at any point its force because of its superficial position in the posterior cervical triangle. It's specially susceptible to damage from penetrating injuries. It may also be used in case of cervical lymph node biopsy. You will take here and radial neck dissection. It's called trial suppression. What are the symptoms of what? Spinal accessory nerve supplies trapezius. Trapezius causes shrugging of the hand. Shrugging. Trapezius muscle is a very long muscle. It causes shrugging action of the hand. So we have to abduction. Trapezius also assists in the shoulder abduction. So it is a secondary muscle in shoulder abduction movement. So patient report generalized weakness in the affected shoulder, girdle and arm, and inability to abduct the shoulder above the 90 degrees or shrug the shoulders. So the method of exam either keep the both hands of the patients in the arm shoulders like this, knock the patient to shrug. So we have to examine the trapezius action. So long thoracic nerve supply is at the level of roots. Long thoracic, it supplies long thoracic nerve supplies serratus anterior muscle. So non-aerosol and distance of brachial plexus supplies serratus anterior muscle supply. This is the long thoracic nerve and it supplies the serratus anterior muscles. So you all know well about swinging of scapula because you read in first unit. So serratus muscle anterior muscle is paralyzed means you have to ask the patient a pushing action against the wall. You have to observe for the movement. So in the presence of in the absence of serratus muscle or weakness, the scapula rotates outwards like this. So it is called the winging of scapula. So the middle border of the scapula will be prominent. This is called winging of scapula. So sciatic nerve, the only nerve I am going to discuss in the lower limb is sciatic nerve. Sciatic nerve is one of the largest and thickest nerve. You all know, may have seen the deer dissection. This thickness is present. Sciatic nerve. Sciatic nerve exits just below the piriformis muscle here, and mainly components of two parts: tibial component and common peroneal component. But common peroneal component only mostly you exhibits paralysis or common peroneal component is more superficial in case of sciatic nerve, and tibial component is present more deeper. It is little bit difficult to damage. So common peroneal nerve is damaged in most cases of the sciatic nerve injuries because common peroneal nerve is more superficial. So what are the most frequent causes of the sciatic nerve? Spinal stenosis at the spinal cord level, and PIVD, and means disc protrusion, and spondylolisthesis, and misplaced intramuscular injections, because the main injection should be given at the outer half of the gluteus maximus muscle. Sometimes if you give injection in the middle half of the gluteus maximus, you are giving injection to the sciatic nerve, or sometimes you will cause damage to injury, mechanical injury to the sciatic nerve, and trauma at the neck of the fibula, Achilles reverse class, because the common peroneal nerve is fixed with the periosteum of the bone and the neck of the fibula. With the neck of the fibula fracture means you most usually you observe the foot drop, means common peroneal nerve injury. So common peroneal nerve supplies dorsiflexors and aortas of the foot, and paralysis of these muscles results in foot drop. So patient walks with high stepping gait like this. So you have to clear the floor by flexing the leg. This is called high stepping gait. Okay, the patient walks with a high stepping gait. While walking, he has to lift the foot in order to clear the ground. In the plantar plexus, the foot which is supplied by the tibial component, which are usually not. This is the foot drop splint. Unless this is a static foot drop splint, then only we apply in case of foot drop. Thank you.
Yeah, what are the